The Denver shooting.
This is an interesting one in terms of secondary legal questions. Everybody knows the bottom line overview of the case is an unlicensed security guard working to protect 9 News at a protest. Trump supporter, or I think the person was a Trump supporter, had bear mace on them for whatever the reason. An altercation ensues, and what happens when you have an armed person with an armed person, different arms, and one arm prevails? The unlicensed security guard pulls the gun, shoots the guy, end of story. Now, so the question is, he's been charged with second-degree murder. So for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, just explain the difference as to what goes into the difference between a first-degree and a second-degree murder charge.
I don't know why he wasn't charged with first-degree homicide, because unlike the Rittenhouse case, there did not appear to me as self-defense under Colorado law. So Colorado's self-defense law is more limited than Wisconsin's is. So Colorado's self-defense law requires that you have proportionate response and it be the only remedy. So whereas Wisconsin doesn't have to have that. With Wisconsin law, if you fear imminent harm, you can use grave bodily harm to the other side. You can't in Colorado. So this guy has someone, he slaps at him, then he backs away, then he uses bear mace, and he just pulls out his gun and in cold blood goes boom. That is not a self-defense under Colorado law. So I don't understand why he wasn't charged with first-degree homicide. So I don't think he has a self-defense available to him. It's interesting to watch the left somehow claim Rittenhouse did not act in self-defense, but this guy did. I understand the political nature of that. I mean, we sort of see it on the right in the Breonna Taylor case, in my view, people's unwillingness to be skeptical of what the police did in the Breonna Taylor case because they're so accustomed to BLM lies about what police conduct is. And they had some choice comments for me last week, but I responded to most of them. Most of them were in good faith. A few were not so much, but that's okay. By the way, you're on mute, Viva.
Is the distinction between first and second degree not premeditation, or whether or not there's a defensible excuse for the conduct?
In most states, the difference between First and Second Amendment will be intentional versus reckless. So usually Second Amendment is where you cause someone's death but didn't intend it. But I don't know how you put it that way when a guy pulls a gun and shoots right at his chest. That's about as much intentional as you could get. You could see, like in a Breonna Taylor case, a reckless homicide charge where you're not even intending to hit her. If you believe that they were reckless in they lacked self-defense because they were reckless. That's how Kentucky law worked. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that the grand jury wasn't given a fair opportunity to make that assessment on their own. But in this case, I don't see how he has a self-defense. Now, by the way, 9 News can be sued civilly. Now it gets tricky because the scope of employment, if his actions are intentional, often the scope of employment doesn't apply, and so they get off the hook. Or the insurance company has indemnification limitation that says we won't pay for any incident if it was intentional. So that's where the nature of the charge may change whether or not 9 News can be on the hook for any wrongful death suit, and whether any insurance is available to pay any judgment in the case.
And so I think that principle is vicarious liability of the employer for their employees. How does that work if it's a contractor?
Still often in the same plot because it's a parent authority. So it's if you are operating within the scope of employment or others believe you have the apparent authority to do so, then it doesn't matter whether you're W-2 or 1099, independent contractor employee is really often only an issue for tax. It rarely impacts your vicarious liability because vicarious liability is all about either ostensible authority or actual authority to be acting on your behest or behalf. And particularly if you gave them the tools and provided the opportunity for them to be there, if they would not have been there otherwise. So, but it can anytime you have an intentional tort committed, it can get tricky. So that's where an intentional assault's committed by someone that works for the government. They're often the government's often let off the hook, and you, the victim, can't get any relief because of the way they've, in my view, misinterpreted sovereign immunity in that context. The same kind of application can apply to employers, though usually employers are given less immunity than the government is in comparable contexts.
Okay, I mean, so it's going to the two issues are going to be whether or not it's any form of valid self-defense. This was in Denver, Colorado. So is there a stand your ground principle in Colorado, or
Not really.
If the guy's bear mace, even if he has bear mace and you have a gun, you have a duty to retreat.
Pretty much, because it's required that it be the only remedy and that it be proportionate. That's the big problem. So it's going to be hard to argue that in response to bear mace, I had to shoot him in the head or shoot him in the chest.
Yeah, no, I think it was in the face that I just brought up the chat. It's no, I mean it's somebody with the gun.
He also looks calm doing it. He doesn't look panicky. He doesn't look nervous. Like you look at the Amy Cooper case. You see someone who's panicking in response to feeling like she's ambushed. You don't have any of that when you see the video of this guy. This guy is calm, pulls the gun out, aims it, fires. That's a tough self-defense case.
I'm just trying to think. I immediately, the criminal side's going to play out. I immediately was just thinking to the liability of 9 News. How do they? Sorry,
it hurts. I was going to say one addendum. It hurts that he's unlicensed, as you mentioned.
Well, so that was my next question: is how does 9 News even hire an unlicensed pistol carrying security guard? I presume maybe they go through an agency and the agency is supposed to vet them. Maybe 9 News is supposed to vet them. I don't understand how any of this happens. I'm just waiting. I mean, I don't think it's a question of if, but rather when, and sooner than later, 9 News is going to see a massive civil suit. There's going
to be a wrongful death suit brought against them. And the discoveries will disclose that. It will depend on the scale of their insurance policy as to whether they can avoid discovery by the insurance company paying it off. But I can tell you, insurance companies hate to pay money on intentional tort cases. So, unless it's defamation where they've already, the only reason they exist is for that particular intentional tort. But they don't like assault cases, sexual assault, other cases. They don't like, they usually claim we don't indemnify that. In fact, in like California, often they can't. So it depends on the state. There's some state laws that actually prohibit insurance companies from insuring certain forms of torts.
Uncle Bubba says you don't bring a gun to a protest. Well, you do if you're a security guard, but not if you're an unlicensed security guard who's not legally, from what I understand, was not legally allowed to possess a firearm on him in that state. It looks like someone who, we were talking about the self-defense and instigating in previous streams. This looks like on its face right now, unless something changes, a dude who knows that he's armed, looking to instigate something so that he can discharge. There was a video, in fact, I was watching a 9 News piece on it where they're running a video that shows the victim earlier on, talking abusively to someone who was recording him, as though that's relevant to what happened to him at that moment. Some people might think it is, some people might think it's not. But it's just another situation where you don't show up to a protest with a gun. This guy happened to be security, but that's not any protocol that any security is supposed to use that I know of.